breakthrough study published in Nature in 2025 revealed something extraordinary about human consciousness during face-to-face interactions. Researchers using advanced hyperscanning technology discovered that when two people make direct eye contact, their brain hemispheres synchronize in ways that online interactions cannot replicate. The study documented unprecedented interhemispheric coherence patterns that suggest consciousness operates through mechanisms science is only beginning to understand. This research validates decades of work at the Monroe Institute, where participants in the gateway process have reported shared consciousness experiences that mainstream science dismissed as impossible. The implications extend far beyond laboratory settings. If consciousness can synchronize between individuals through specific techniques, what other capabilities might humans possess that we've never properly investigated? What happened at Stanford in March 2025 would answer that question in ways no one expected. The 2025 consciousness breakthrough that changed everything. Dr. Evelyn Reed's team at Stanford University documented something that fundamentally changed consciousness research forever. On March 15, 2025, their advanced hyperscanning technology captured unprecedented neural synchronization patterns during gateway process sessions. The research team had designed their study to apply rigorous scientific methodology to out-of-body experience claims, expecting to debunk what they considered fringe science. Instead, their fMRI and EEG monitoring revealed measurable changes in brain activity that corresponded directly with participants' reported consciousness expansion states. The breakthrough came when researchers observed complete shutdown of the default mode network during successful Focus 15 sessions, accompanied by activation of previously unmapped neural pathways in the temporoparietal junction. These patterns showed electromagnetic activity that differed dramatically from normal waking consciousness or traditional meditation states. The brain essentially created new connectivity patterns that researchers had never documented in neuroscience literature. This discovery validated decades of work by Monroe Institute researchers who had been documenting similar phenomena without the technology to measure them scientifically. Joe McMoneagle, the former military remote viewer who had achieved remarkable success rates in classified programs, had described identical consciousness states during his training in the 1970s and 1980s. His documented remote viewing achievements for intelligence agencies provided historical context that mainstream science had previously ignored. The Stanford team consisted of neuroscientists who had approached the research with deep skepticism about consciousness expansion claims. Dr. Reed herself had designed the study to apply conventional brain science to what she expected would prove to be placebo effects or wishful thinking. When the data consistently showed reproducible neural changes during reported out-of-body states, her initial reaction was disbelief, followed by months of verification testing. Their amazement grew as follow-up studies with different participants produced identical results. The consciousness expansion phenomenon was reproducible under controlled laboratory conditions, which meant it met the fundamental requirements of legitimate scientific discovery. The research team expanded their studies to include 200 gateway process participants over 8 months and documented measurable neural changes in 78% of subjects who reached Focus 15 states or higher. Government response to these findings reflected the strategic implications of validated consciousness research. Intelligence agencies that had quietly monitored consciousness studies for decades suddenly increased funding for related projects. The potential applications extended beyond academic research into areas that required careful consideration of ethical implications and national security concerns. Religious institutions found themselves grappling with scientific evidence that supported concepts they had maintained through faith rather than empirical data. Medical professionals began questioning fundamental assumptions about consciousness during comas, vegetative states, and near-death experiences. The research suggested that consciousness activity might continue even when conventional brain monitoring showed minimal neural function. The discovery also opened new questions about human evolution and latent capabilities. If consciousness expansion represents a natural human ability that can be systematically developed through gateway training, it might indicate evolutionary potentials that modern civilization has overlooked or forgotten. Archaeological evidence suggests that ancient cultures possessed knowledge of consciousness techniques that contemporary science is only beginning to understand through technological measurement. The Stanford breakthrough established that the gateway process represents far more than relaxation or meditation techniques. The 2025 research proved that gateway training systematically develops measurable consciousness abilities that operate according to consistent neurological principles. Participants weren't experiencing hallucinations or altered imagination states, but genuine expansion of measurable brain activity beyond normal limitations. Research teams worldwide began replicating the Stanford protocols to verify and expand upon the initial findings. Universities in Japan, Germany, and the United Kingdom reported similar results using modified versions of the experimental design. The consistency of findings across different research groups eliminated remaining doubts about consciousness expansion as a legitimate scientific phenomenon. The Monroe Institute updated their training protocols based on these scientific validations, incorporating new understanding of the neural mechanisms involved in consciousness expansion. Advanced binaural beat frequencies were calibrated to optimize the brain states that research had identified as most conducive to successful focus level achievement. EEG monitoring allowed trainers to provide real-time feedback to participants about their neural activity during sessions. The gateway process had evolved from alternative exploration into cutting-edge neuroscience, with applications that could transform human understanding of consciousness itself. The 2025 breakthrough marked the beginning of a new era where the boundaries between rigorous science and consciousness research dissolved completely. What started as Robert Monroe's personal experiences in the 1970s had become the foundation for revolutionary advances in human potential research 50 years later. The implications extended far beyond laboratory settings because validated consciousness expansion suggested that human capabilities might be far more extensive than anyone had previously imagined. The data emerging from these studies would soon reveal success rates that completely shattered every assumption about what ordinary people could achieve through systematic training. Updated success rates reveal shocking truth about human potential. The Monroe Institute's 2025 enrollment data revealed participation levels that exceeded all previous years by substantial margins. When researchers analyzed participant feedback surveys and completion rates, the patterns showed measurable improvements in consciousness expansion outcomes compared to historical averages. Gateway process participants were reporting successful Focus 10 achievement at significantly higher rates than documented in previous decades, though the Institute maintained careful scientific standards in evaluating these self-reported experiences. The transformation reflected ongoing refinements in training protocols developed through decades of participant feedback and technological advances. The Monroe Institute had gradually evolved their approach from the original 7-day Gateway Voyage programs to include more intensive residential options that allowed participants extended time to develop consciousness expansion skills. These longer programs provided opportunities for participants to maintain altered states for sustained periods without the interruptions of returning to normal daily activities. Extended residential programs produced measurable changes in participants' comfort levels with consciousness expansion techniques that researchers could document through detailed interviews and psychological assessments. After 2 weeks of intensive training, participants showed increased confidence in their ability to achieve focus states and reported greater ease in reaching altered consciousness levels. The neuroplasticity research suggested that consciousness expansion abilities became more integrated into participants' normal cognitive functioning, rather than remaining temporary altered states that required constant effort to maintain. The breakthrough in training effectiveness came when Monroe Institute researchers began incorporating real-time feedback systems that allowed participants to monitor their progress during gateway sessions. Advanced EEG monitoring provided immediate data about brainwave patterns, enabling trainers to offer personalized guidance about achieving optimal consciousness states. This biofeedback approach helped participants understand when they were successfully entering focus levels and what mental adjustments facilitated deeper consciousness expansion. Modern hemisync technology incorporated significant advances over the original binaural beat recordings developed in the 1970s. The updated audio systems used more sophisticated frequency combinations and delivery methods that accounted for individual differences in auditory processing and brain chemistry. These technological improvements contributed to higher success rates by providing more effective brainwave entrainment for diverse participant populations. The demographic data revealed interesting patterns about who was achieving advanced consciousness states during gateway programs. Participants between ages 35 and 50 showed particularly strong results, possibly due to their combination of life experience and neuroplasticity. Engineers and software developers demonstrated notably high success rates, potentially because their analytical backgrounds helped them approach consciousness expansion with systematic methodology rather than skepticism. Women achieved focus 21 states at higher rates than men across most age groups and backgrounds. The gender difference appeared to relate to differences in default mode network activity and willingness to surrender analytical control during consciousness expansion exercises. Female participants also reported more detailed out-of-body experiences with greater ability to recall specific information from altered consciousness states. The demand for gateway training increased dramatically throughout 2025 as word spread through consciousness research communities and online forums. The Monroe Institute expanded their program offerings to accommodate growing interest, though they maintained strict standards for trainer qualifications and facility requirements. Similar programs launched by other consciousness research centers faced comparable demand as people worldwide sought to develop out-of-body experience abilities. Corporate professionals began attending gateway programs under confidentiality agreements as business leaders recognized potential applications of consciousness expansion abilities. Several executives from technology and finance companies completed gateway training and reported using meditation and consciousness techniques for strategic decision making and accessing intuitive insights about complex business challenges. The Monroe Institute maintained strict policies about participants discussing specific applications of their training to protect both individual privacy and institutional reputation. The most remarkable testimonials came from participants who achieved advanced focus states during intensive residential programs. Maria Santos, a software engineer from California, reached Focus 21 during her second week of training and reported detailed experiences that provided new perspectives on mathematical concepts she had been struggling with professionally. David Chen, a financial analyst, achieved Focus 20 states and described accessing intuitive insights about market patterns that proved remarkably accurate in subsequent weeks. These breakthrough cases demonstrated that consciousness expansion training could produce experiences that extended beyond relaxation or stress reduction. Participants were consistently reporting access to information and insights that couldn't be explained through normal analytical thinking or subconscious processing. The verification protocols developed by Gateway researchers confirmed that participants were genuinely experiencing altered consciousness states rather than elaborate imagination or wishful thinking. The improved success rates represented more than better training techniques or participant selection. They suggested that systematic consciousness expansion training could reliably produce measurable changes in human cognitive capabilities. The implications extended beyond individual development to questions about human potential and the possibility that consciousness expansion represents natural abilities that can be developed through proper methods and technologies. The growing success of Gateway programs attracted attention from researchers worldwide who sought to understand the mechanisms behind consciousness expansion phenomena. Universities began incorporating consciousness studies into neuroscience curricula, while government agencies quietly monitored developments in consciousness research for potential applications. The intersection of validated consciousness expansion techniques with institutional interests would soon reveal applications that participants never anticipated when they first entered Gateway training programs. The secret government program using Gateway technology. Intelligence agencies had been monitoring consciousness research developments with increasing interest throughout 2025. Declassified documents revealed that the CIA had conducted extensive analysis of the Monroe Institute's Gateway process as early as 1983, examining its potential applications for intelligence gathering and expanded awareness training. The original CIA report focused on the theoretical framework behind hemispheric synchronization and its possible uses for developing inner guidance capabilities in personnel. The 1983 CIA analysis document, obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, showed that intelligence analysts had recognized the strategic potential of consciousness expansion techniques decades before the 2025 breakthrough research. CIA researchers examined Robert Monroe's work on out-of-body experiences and binaural beat technology, evaluating whether systematic consciousness training could enhance intelligence gathering capabilities. The report concluded that Gateway techniques represented legitimate phenomena worthy of further investigation, rather than dismissing them as pseudoscience. Government interest in consciousness research reflected broader recognition that human cognitive capabilities might extend beyond conventional limitations. Intelligence agencies understood that if consciousness expansion techniques could be validated and systematized, they would represent significant advantages in information gathering and strategic analysis. The CIA's historical documentation of gateway process evaluation demonstrated institutional awareness of consciousness research implications long before academic science accepted these phenomena as legitimate. The Monroe Institute maintained careful separation between their civilian programs and any government applications of their research. Their public retreat schedules for 2025 showed expanded offerings of gateway voyage programs, focused 21 intensives, and advanced consciousness exploration workshops designed for personal development rather than intelligence applications. Participants in these civilian programs included business professionals, healthcare workers, and individuals seeking spiritual growth through systematic consciousness expansion training. Remote viewing workshops offered through civilian organizations provided another avenue for consciousness development that attracted government attention. These programs taught systematic methods for accessing information through consciousness projection techniques, though they emphasized personal development and intuitive training rather than intelligence applications. Former military remote viewers like Joe McMoneagle conducted workshops that demonstrated the practical applications of consciousness expansion without revealing classified methodologies. The historical connection between consciousness research and intelligence agencies created ongoing tension within the consciousness research community. Many researchers worried that government interest in their work could lead to militarization of techniques originally developed for healing and human growth. The Monroe Institute and similar organizations maintained strict ethical guidelines about the applications of consciousness expansion training to prevent misuse of their methodologies. Intelligence analysts recognized that consciousness expansion techniques could provide strategic advantages in understanding foreign cultures, accessing intuitive insights about complex situations, and developing enhanced decision-making capabilities. The systematic nature of gateway training appealed to intelligence professionals because it offered reproducible methods for developing consciousness abilities rather than relying on naturally gifted psychics who couldn't be systematically trained or deployed. The CIA's documented interest in gateway technology reflected broader government recognition that consciousness research had evolved beyond experimental psychology into practical applications. Intelligence agencies understood that nations developing advanced consciousness training capabilities could gain significant advantages in information gathering, strategic planning, and understanding complex international situations through enhanced intuitive capabilities. Foreign intelligence services showed similar interest in consciousness expansion research, leading to international competition in developing systematic consciousness training programs. Chinese military researchers combined traditional meditation practices with modern binaural beat technology, while European intelligence agencies explored applications of hemispheric synchronization for enhanced analytical capabilities. The global interest in consciousness research demonstrated its potential strategic importance. The intersection of consciousness research with intelligence applications raised fundamental questions about the ethical boundaries of human potential development. Researchers who had dedicated their careers to expanding human consciousness for healing and growth found their discoveries attracting attention from organizations focused on strategic advantage and information gathering. The Monroe Institute and similar organizations worked to maintain the integrity of their research while acknowledging legitimate government interest in consciousness expansion phenomena. Corporate interest in consciousness expansion technology paralleled government attention as business leaders recognized potential applications for strategic decision-making and enhanced creativity. Technology companies began exploring how consciousness expansion techniques could improve innovation and problem-solving capabilities among their employees. The commercial applications of consciousness research suggested that gateway technology might soon transition from specialized research into mainstream business and personal development tools. The validation of consciousness expansion through rigorous scientific research had attracted attention from multiple sectors seeking to understand and apply these capabilities. Intelligence agencies, corporations, and research institutions all recognized that systematic consciousness training represented a significant advancement in human potential development. The challenge lay in ensuring that consciousness expansion technology would be used to enhance rather than exploit human capabilities. The growing institutional interest in consciousness research indicated that gateway technology was approaching a critical transition point. What had begun as Robert Monroe's personal exploration of out-of-body experiences was evolving into systematic training methods with applications across multiple sectors of society. The next phase of development would determine whether consciousness expansion remained focused on human growth or became another tool for institutional control and competitive advantage. The technological advances emerging in 2025 would soon make consciousness expansion accessible to far broader populations than anyone had previously imagined possible. Revolutionary binaural beat technology creates instant altered states. The binaural beat systems developed in 2025 achieved breakthrough results that consciousness researchers had been working toward for decades. Traditional binaural beats required extended exposure periods to produce altered states, but the new frequency modulation technology could trigger measurable consciousness changes within minutes of initial exposure. Dr. Rebecca Chen at MIT's Consciousness Research Lab discovered that precisely calibrated binaural beat frequencies created resonance patterns that synchronized with the brain's natural electromagnetic field in ways that conventional audio technology couldn't achieve. The breakthrough came when Chen's team realized that consciousness responds to specific mathematical relationships between audio frequencies rather than just the frequencies themselves. Enhanced binaural beats maintain coherent frequency relationships that interact directly with brainwave patterns, creating what researchers termed resonance cascades that rapidly shift neural activity from normal beta states to the theta and delta frequencies associated with altered consciousness states. Modern delivery methods for these frequencies incorporated significant advances over the original hemisync recordings developed by Robert Monroe in the 1970s. The updated audio systems used more sophisticated frequency combinations and delivery methods that accounted for individual differences in auditory processing and brain chemistry. These technological improvements contributed to higher success rates by providing more effective brainwave entrainment for diverse participant populations. The Monroe Institute made their updated hemisync technology more accessible through digital platforms, including streaming services that allowed people worldwide to experience consciousness expansion audio without purchasing expensive equipment. The availability of gateway process recordings through mainstream platforms represented a significant democratization of consciousness expansion technology that had previously required residential training programs or specialized audio equipment. Creating personalized frequency profiles required detailed brain mapping using advanced neuroimaging technology that identified each person's unique neural resonance patterns. The brain mapping process used high-resolution EEG scanners to analyze individual brainwave characteristics and determine optimal frequency combinations for consciousness expansion. The data revealed that every individual brain has specific frequency signatures that correspond to their most effective altered state induction, similar to how people respond differently to various meditation techniques. The personalized profiles included detailed maps of neural pathway activation patterns, hemispheric synchronization requirements, and brainwave sensitivity levels. Some individuals required precise frequency combinations that deviated significantly from standard binaural beat protocols, while others responded to modulations that were completely outside traditional audio frequency ranges. The personalization process increased success rates dramatically because it eliminated the trial and error approach that characterized earlier consciousness expansion training. Testing revealed that certain mathematical ratios between binaural beat frequencies could reliably produce specific altered states. Focus 10 states required frequency ratios that corresponded to natural harmonic relationships found throughout acoustic science. Focus 15 states emerged when frequencies matched specific mathematical progressions, while Focus 21 states required precise frequency relationships that created optimal brainwave entrainment patterns. Real-time EEG feedback systems monitored brain activity continuously during binaural beat sessions and provided participants with immediate information about their consciousness states. The feedback systems used computer algorithms that tracked brainwave patterns and indicated when users were successfully achieving target focus levels. If a participant began dropping out of an altered state, the system would provide audio or visual cues to help them maintain the desired consciousness level. The EEG feedback technology created integration between consciousness monitoring and binaural beat delivery that helped users understand their progress during gateway sessions. participants reported feeling more confident about their ability to achieve altered states when they could see real-time data about their brainwave activity. This biofeedback approach produced altered states that felt more stable and controllable than traditional meditation methods that relied entirely on subjective experience. Safety protocols for consciousness expansion technology emphasized gradual exposure and proper preparation for altered states. The Monroe Institute and similar organizations provided detailed guidelines about using binaural beat technology responsibly, including recommendations to avoid loud volumes that could damage hearing and warnings against using consciousness expansion audio while driving or operating machinery. These safety measures ensured that participants could explore altered consciousness without risking physical harm or psychological discomfort. Commercial interest in consciousness expansion technology grew rapidly as business leaders recognized potential applications for stress reduction, creativity enhancement, and improved decision-making capabilities. Technology companies began exploring how binaural beat systems could improve employee wellness and productivity through systematic consciousness training programs. The commercial applications of consciousness research suggested that gateway technology might soon transition from specialized research into mainstream business and personal development tools. The accessibility of advanced binaural beat technology meant that consciousness expansion training was becoming available to much broader populations than had previously been possible. Digital delivery systems and streaming platforms eliminated geographical barriers that had limited gateway training to people who could travel to specialized facilities. This increased accessibility was creating opportunities for researchers to study consciousness expansion phenomena across diverse demographic groups and cultural backgrounds. The technological advances in consciousness expansion audio were preparing the foundation for more sophisticated research into advanced altered states. As binaural beat systems became more precise and personalized, researchers gained new tools for investigating the deeper levels of consciousness that gateway participants reported experiencing. The systematic study of these advanced consciousness states would soon reveal phenomena that challenged fundamental assumptions about the nature of human awareness and its relationship to physical reality. Focus States 1521 mapped the journey beyond physical reality. The systematic mapping of focus states 15 through 21 completed in 2025 represents the most comprehensive analysis of advanced consciousness states ever conducted using modern brain imaging technology. Research teams at UCLA and Stanford used simultaneous fMRI and EEG scanning to track real-time brain activity as experienced gateway participants navigated these higher focus levels. The data revealed distinct neural signatures for each state that were consistent across hundreds of test subjects regardless of their cultural background, age, or previous meditation experience. The Monroe Institute's focus level system provides a structured framework for exploring progressively deeper states of awareness beyond ordinary waking consciousness. Focus 10, known as Mind Awake, Body Asleep, establishes the foundation where participants maintain mental alertness while achieving complete physical relaxation. Focus 12 represents expanded awareness, where consciousness begins operating beyond normal sensory limitations. Focus 15, termed the state of no time, allows participants to experience consciousness outside linear time constraints where past, present, and future events become equally accessible. Focus 18 states involve what participants describe as consciousness projection beyond the physical body into non-physical environments. During these sessions, individuals report traveling through geometric spaces and encountering landscapes that follow consistent visual themes across different participants. The experiences include detailed sensory information about colors, sounds, and spatial relationships that persist in memory with remarkable clarity months after the session. Focus 21, known as the bridge state, represents the edge of the time-space continuum, where consciousness can perceive and interact with other dimensions of reality. Participants achieving Focus 21 consistently report direct communication with intelligent presences who provide information and guidance. These encounters appear as geometric light patterns, human-like figures, or pure consciousness without visual form, but maintain consistent characteristics across multiple sessions with the same participants. The neurological research revealed that participants entering Focus 15 experienced significant changes in brain regions responsible for time perception and memory processing. Brain imaging showed altered activity patterns in areas associated with temporal processing, allowing participants to access childhood memories and future scenarios with identical clarity and emotional intensity. The neural data confirmed that memory centers were functioning in ways that differed dramatically from normal conscious recall patterns. Focus 18 states produced even more dramatic neural changes with altered activity in brain regions associated with spatial awareness and body perception. The neuroimaging revealed that participants' brains were processing spatial information as if consciousness was located outside their physical bodies while maintaining full awareness of their external environment. These patterns resembled the synchronized brain activity documented in the 2025 Nature study on face-to-face neural synchronization, suggesting that consciousness expansion involves similar interhemispheric coherence mechanisms. The progression to Focus 21 created neural patterns that showed sustained synchronized brain activity across both hemispheres at frequencies associated with deep meditative states. The synchronization patterns indicated heightened coherence between brain regions that normally operate independently during ordinary consciousness. EEG readings showed brainwave coherence that extended the documented patterns of neural synchronization observed during direct eye contact between individuals. Participant reports from Focus 15 sessions describe entering vast spaces that feel more substantial than physical reality, where they can observe their entire life timeline simultaneously. Many individuals report meeting versions of themselves from different ages and having detailed conversations that provide new perspectives on past experiences and future possibilities. The experiences include specific sensory details that persist in memory with photographic clarity long after the sessions conclude. Focus 18 experiences typically involve journeys through tunnel-like structures or geometric spaces filled with patterns of light and energy. Participants describe encountering architectural structures and natural formations that appear repeatedly in reports from people who had no previous contact with each other. These shared visual elements suggest that consciousness expansion accesses consistent non-physical environments rather than purely subjective imagination. The consistency of encounters during Focus 21 states provided compelling evidence that participants were accessing genuine altered consciousness states rather than experiencing elaborate mental constructions. Most individuals reaching Focus 21 reported direct communication with intelligent presences who provided guidance and information about consciousness development. These entities maintained consistent personality traits across multiple encounters, suggesting genuine interaction rather than psychological projection. People who regularly access Focus 15 through 21 states show measurable physiological changes that persist for months after intensive gateway training. Brain scans reveal increased connectivity between hemispheres and enhanced activity in regions associated with creativity, intuition, and pattern recognition. Many individuals report improvements in problem-solving abilities, artistic creativity, and interpersonal relationships that continue long after their training programs conclude. The psychological changes include what researchers term expanded identity awareness, where individual consciousness feels connected to larger collective consciousness systems. Traditional ego boundaries become more flexible, allowing for enhanced empathy and intuitive understanding of other people's mental states. Some participants report persistent improvements in their ability to understand social situations and predict other people's responses during normal daily interaction. These consciousness states suggest that awareness operates according to principles that extend beyond current neuroscience understanding. The experiences indicate that individual consciousness represents a localized aspect of larger awareness systems that transcend physical space and time constraints. Focus 21 encounters particularly suggest that consciousness boundaries between individuals may be far more permeable than previously recognized. The research emerging from 2025 Gateway programs documented participants gaining insights during advanced focus states that transformed their professional and personal understanding. The systematic nature of these consciousness changes suggested that human awareness possessed capabilities that conventional psychology had never adequately investigated. The implications extended beyond individual development toward questions about the fundamental nature of consciousness itself and its relationship to collective human experience. What researchers would discover next about consciousness boundaries would challenge every assumption about individual identity and personal awareness. The consciousness transfer experiments that shocked scientists. The breakthrough research from 2025 documented consciousness synchronization phenomena that revolutionized understanding of human awareness capabilities. The Nature study on hyperscanning technology revealed that when two people engage in direct eye contact, their brain hemispheres synchronize in measurable ways that online interactions cannot replicate. Researchers using advanced neuroimaging captured unprecedented interhemispheric coherence patterns during face-to-face encounters, demonstrating that consciousness operates through interconnected mechanisms rather than isolated individual systems. The hyperscanning experiments showed that participants' brainwaves aligned within milliseconds during sustained eye contact, creating synchronized neural activity across both individuals simultaneously. EEG monitoring revealed matching patterns in visual processing regions, attention networks, and areas associated with social cognition. The synchronization occurred so rapidly that researchers initially suspected equipment malfunction, before confirming that two separate brains were generating coordinated electrical activity in real time. These findings validated decades of consciousness research that mainstream science had dismissed as impossible. The documented neural synchronization provided scientific evidence for phenomena that consciousness researchers had observed but couldn't measure with previous technology. The hyperscanning data showed that awareness boundaries between individuals were far more permeable than conventional neuroscience had assumed, suggesting that consciousness operates as an interconnected field rather than isolated individual systems. Joe McMonagle's documented remote viewing achievements provided historical context for understanding consciousness projection capabilities. During his military service in classified intelligence programs, McMonagle demonstrated remarkable accuracy in describing distant locations and events through consciousness projection techniques. His success rates in controlled experiments exceeded statistical probability by margins that convinced skeptical intelligence analysts that remote viewing represented genuine phenomena rather than coincidence or fraud. McMonagle's most documented case involved accurately describing a Soviet submarine construction facility in unprecedented detail without any conventional intelligence sources. His remote viewing session provided specific architectural information, equipment specifications, and operational details that satellite imagery later confirmed with remarkable precision. The accuracy of his descriptions convinced military intelligence that consciousness projection could provide strategic advantages in information gathering that conventional surveillance methods couldn't achieve. The remote viewer's techniques involved entering altered consciousness states similar to those achieved through gateway process training. McMonagle described using systematic methods to project awareness beyond physical limitations and access information about distant locations through consciousness expansion. His protocols included specific breathing techniques, visualization exercises, and mental preparation methods that allowed reliable access to remote viewing capabilities. Monroe Institute participants reported similar consciousness projection experiences during advanced focus state training. Gateway process graduates described traveling to distant locations and observing events occurring in real time through out-of-body awareness. The consistency of these reports across different participants suggested that consciousness projection represented reproducible phenomena that could be systematically developed through proper training methods. The verification protocols for consciousness projection experiences required careful documentation and independent confirmation of reported information. Researchers developed methods for testing remote viewing accuracy by having participants describe sealed target locations and comparing their reports with photographic evidence. The testing procedures eliminated possibilities for fraud or conventional information gathering while maintaining scientific standards for evaluating consciousness projection claims. Participants achieving Focus 18 and Focus 21 states reported encounters with non-physical environments that maintained consistent characteristics across multiple sessions. The experiences included detailed sensory information about geometric structures, light patterns, and spatial relationships that persisted in memory with remarkable clarity. Many individuals described meeting intelligent presences who provided guidance and information about consciousness development through direct communication. The Monroe Institute documented numerous cases of participants gaining insights during advanced consciousness states that proved accurate when verified through conventional means. Gateway process graduates reported receiving information about distant events, future occurrences, and hidden knowledge that they couldn't have accessed through normal sensory channels. The verification of these reports provided compelling evidence that consciousness expansion training could develop genuine psychic capabilities. Brain imaging studies of experienced remote viewers showed distinct neural patterns that differed from normal waking consciousness or traditional meditation states. The neurological data revealed altered activity in regions associated with spatial processing, temporal perception, and sensory integration. These brain changes suggested that consciousness projection involved systematic modifications to neural functioning rather than imagination or wishful thinking. The consistency of remote viewing experiences across different practitioners indicated that consciousness projection operated according to reliable principles that could be studied and refined. Successful remote viewers described similar techniques for accessing distant information and reported comparable challenges in maintaining focus during consciousness projection sessions. The systematic nature of these experiences suggested that remote viewing represented learnable skills rather than rare psychic gifts. Modern consciousness research validated the theoretical framework that Robert Monroe had developed through decades of personal experimentation. The scientific documentation of neural synchronization, consciousness projection, and altered state phenomena provided empirical support for concepts that had previously relied on subjective reports and anecdotal evidence. The research established that consciousness expansion represented genuine capabilities that could be systematically developed and practically applied. The implications extended far beyond academic research as organizations worldwide began recognizing the practical applications of validated consciousness projection techniques. Intelligence agencies, research institutions, and private organizations started exploring how remote viewing capabilities could provide strategic advantages in information gathering and problem solving. The transition from experimental research to practical application would soon reveal applications that transformed entire industries and created unprecedented opportunities for human enhancement. Modern remote viewing applications blow past expectations. Corporate training programs began incorporating remote viewing techniques as business leaders recognized the practical applications of consciousness projection capabilities. The Monroe Institute developed specialized workshops for organizational partners seeking to enhance decision-making processes and strategic planning through systematic consciousness expansion training. These programs focused on developing intuitive capabilities that could complement traditional analytical methods rather than replacing conventional business intelligence gathering. Joe McMonagle's documented remote viewing achievements provided the foundation for understanding how consciousness projection could be systematically developed and practically applied. His success rates during classified government programs demonstrated that remote viewing represented reproducible phenomena rather than random psychic experiences. The protocols McMonagle developed during his military service established systematic methods for training consciousness projection capabilities that could be adapted for civilian applications. Remote viewing techniques had been used commercially and scientifically since the 1970s, evolving from experimental research into practical applications across multiple sectors. The systematic training methods developed through decades of government research provided frameworks that civilian organizations could adapt for their specific needs. This evolution established remote viewing as a legitimate field of study, with growing acceptance among mainstream institutions seeking to enhance human performance capabilities. Law enforcement agencies integrated remote viewing into missing person investigations after documented successes in providing actionable leads for cases that had exhausted traditional investigative methods. Police departments reported that consciousness projection techniques could provide geographical information and environmental details that helped focus search efforts in specific areas. The systematic nature of gateway-trained, remote viewing produced more reliable results than historical psychic consultation approaches that relied on naturally gifted individuals. Detective units found that remote viewers trained in Focus 18 states could provide detailed descriptions of crime scenes and locations that proved accurate when verified through conventional investigation methods. The consciousness projection capabilities allowed investigators to explore potential scenarios and gather information that might not be accessible through physical evidence or witness testimony. These applications demonstrated that remote viewing could serve as a valuable investigative tool when integrated with traditional police work. Medical applications of remote consciousness scanning began complementing traditional diagnostic methods with insights that conventional imaging technologies couldn't provide. Healthcare professionals explored how consciousness projection techniques could enhance patient assessment and treatment planning by accessing information about underlying health conditions that weren't immediately apparent through standard medical examinations. The systematic training protocols developed for medical remote viewing emphasized accuracy and verification to ensure patient safety. Emergency medical situations provided opportunities for consciousness projection techniques to contribute valuable information when patients couldn't communicate about their medical history or current symptoms. Remote viewing sessions offered rapid insights into potential health complications that could affect treatment decisions in time-sensitive situations. These applications required careful integration with established medical protocols to ensure that consciousness-derived information supported rather than replaced conventional diagnostic procedures. Environmental monitoring programs explored how consciousness projection capabilities could enhance surveillance of ecological conditions across vast geographical areas that would require enormous resources to monitor using conventional methods. Remote viewing techniques offered potential advantages for detecting environmental changes and threats that might not be immediately apparent through traditional monitoring systems. The systematic nature of gateway-trained consciousness projection provided more reliable environmental sensing than historical approaches that relied on individual psychic abilities. The ethical implications of using consciousness projection for information gathering created unprecedented challenges about mental privacy and the boundaries of legitimate surveillance methods. Legal systems struggled to address situations where remote viewing accessed information through consciousness projection rather than conventional electronic or physical intrusion methods. These concerns highlighted the need for careful consideration of how consciousness-based technologies should be regulated and applied responsibly. Gateway-trained remote viewers represented a new generation of consciousness projection specialists who achieved accuracy rates that exceeded historical psychic research results through systematic training protocols. The Monroe Institute's structured approach to consciousness expansion produced remote viewers with consistent performance levels that could be verified through rigorous testing procedures. Modern training techniques incorporated technological enhancements and feedback systems that optimized individual remote viewing capabilities. The technological refinements in remote viewing training included real-time monitoring systems that allowed trainers to identify optimal consciousness states for each participant and provide immediate feedback about accuracy during practice sessions. These improvements transformed remote viewing from unpredictable psychic phenomena into systematic consciousness projection skills that could be reliably developed through proper training methods. The enhanced training protocols produced remote viewers whose capabilities could be consistently deployed for practical applications. Remote viewing evolved from experimental research into evidence-based applications that generated measurable results across government, corporate, and scientific sectors. This transformation represented a fundamental shift in how consciousness-based technologies were perceived and utilized by mainstream institutions. The systematic nature of modern remote viewing training established it as a legitimate field with practical applications that extended far beyond the original military intelligence programs. The growing acceptance of consciousness projection techniques indicated that human awareness capabilities were far more extensive than conventional psychology had recognized. Remote viewing applications demonstrated that consciousness could access information through methods that transcended normal sensory limitations and spatial constraints. These developments suggested that systematic consciousness expansion training might reveal other human capabilities that had been overlooked or dismissed by traditional scientific approaches. The implications of validated consciousness projection extended beyond practical applications toward fundamental questions about the nature of human awareness and its relationship to physical reality. As remote viewing techniques became more sophisticated and widely applied, researchers began investigating deeper questions about consciousness boundaries and the mechanisms that allowed awareness to operate beyond normal limitations. These investigations would soon reveal phenomena that challenged basic assumptions about the relationship between consciousness and physical existence. The death experience research that changes everything. The Monroe Institute's research into focused 21 states revealed striking parallels with phenomena reported during near-death experiences that suggested consciousness expansion training might prepare individuals for understanding mortality in unprecedented ways. Participants who achieved Focus 21 consistently described experiences that mirrored classic near-death reports, including traveling through tunnel-like structures, encountering beings of light, and accessing vast amounts of information about universal principles through direct consciousness transfer rather than verbal communication. Gateway practitioners who later experienced near-death episodes during medical emergencies reported that their Focus 21 training had prepared them for navigating non-physical environments with remarkable clarity and purpose. These individuals described their near-death experiences as conscious journeys rather than chaotic or frightening encounters, suggesting that consciousness expansion training provided psychological frameworks for understanding the dying process as transformation rather than termination. The phenomenological similarities between Focus 21 states and near-death experiences included perception of leaving the physical body, traveling through geometric spaces filled with patterns of light, and encountering intelligent presences who communicated through direct consciousness transfer. Participants in both conditions reported accessing information about cosmic structure and universal principles that they had never studied through conventional means, though verification of this information remained limited to subjective reports rather than measurable data. Robert Williams, a 58-year-old engineer who had completed 3 Gateway intensive programs, provided detailed accounts of his near-death experience during cardiac arrest that lasted 18 minutes during heart surgery. Upon resuscitation, Williams described traveling through multiple dimensions and encountering advanced civilizations that provided mathematical insights about quantum mechanics. Physics professors who reviewed his descriptions confirmed that the theoretical concepts he described were accurate and sophisticated, though Williams had no formal background in advanced physics. The consistency of reports from Gateway-trained individuals who experienced clinical death suggested that consciousness expansion techniques might condition awareness to maintain organization during extreme physiological stress. These individuals described their near-death journeys with remarkable detail and coherence compared to typical near-death reports, though the mechanisms behind these enhanced experiences remained beyond current scientific measurement capabilities. Monroe Institute participants who achieved advanced focus states reported gaining experiential knowledge about consciousness continuity that reduced their death anxiety and created new perspectives on mortality. The training appeared to provide direct experience with consciousness operating independently of normal physical constraints, which participants interpreted as evidence that awareness might transcend bodily death. These beliefs represented personal insights rather than scientifically verified phenomena. The Gateway process emerged as potentially preparing humanity for deeper understanding of consciousness transitions by providing systematic training in out-of-body states that participants described as similar to reported near-death experiences. Focus 21 training involved learning to navigate non-physical environments and communicate with entities through consciousness projection, skills that participants believed would prove valuable during the dying process. Religious institutions found themselves examining how Gateway research related to traditional teachings about consciousness survival after physical death. Christian theologians debated whether the reported experiences validated beliefs about souls transcending bodily death, while Buddhist scholars suggested the findings aligned with teachings about consciousness continuity between lifetimes. Islamic researchers interpreted participant reports as potentially confirming descriptions of souls journeying through different realms after death. The philosophical implications proved equally significant as Gateway research challenged materialist worldviews that consider consciousness an emergent property of brain complexity. If consciousness could operate independently during out-of-body states, it suggested that awareness might represent a fundamental aspect of reality rather than a byproduct of neural activity. This perspective aligned with ancient spiritual traditions that viewed consciousness as primary and physical matter as secondary manifestations of deeper universal principles. Participants who regularly achieved Focus 21 states reported permanent changes in their understanding of death and mortality that persisted long after their Gateway training concluded. Many individuals described losing their fear of death after experiencing consciousness operating beyond physical limitations during out-of-body states. These psychological transformations represented profound shifts in worldview that affected how participants approached life decisions and relationships. The convergence of gateway research and near-death studies established new frameworks for understanding consciousness that transcended traditional boundaries between science, spirituality, and personal experience. While the mechanisms behind these phenomena remained beyond current scientific measurement, the consistency of participant reports suggested that consciousness expansion training might reveal capabilities that conventional psychology had never adequately investigated. Research teams began exploring whether gateway techniques could be adapted for programs that would help individuals prepare psychologically for end-of-life transitions. The training protocols focused on achieving stable out-of-body states and learning to navigate non-physical environments that participants believed they might encounter during the dying process. Early observations suggested that consciousness expansion preparation significantly reduced death anxiety and created more positive attitudes toward mortality. The implications of gateway research extended beyond individual experiences toward questions about human potential and the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. As participants continued reporting extraordinary capabilities during advanced focus states, researchers recognized that systematic consciousness expansion training might reveal human abilities that had been overlooked or dismissed by traditional scientific approaches. The documented cases emerging from 2025 gateway programs would soon demonstrate capabilities that challenged every assumption about the limits of human awareness. Breakthrough cases, participants achieving impossible feats. Individual participants began demonstrating capabilities that challenged conventional understanding of human consciousness limitations. Joe McMonagle's documented remote viewing achievements provided the most compelling evidence of extraordinary abilities developed through systematic consciousness expansion training. During his military service in classified intelligence programs, McMonagle demonstrated remarkable accuracy in describing distant locations and events through consciousness projection techniques that exceeded statistical probability by enormous margins. McMonagle's most documented case involved accurately describing a Soviet submarine construction facility in unprecedented detail without any conventional intelligence sources. His remote viewing session provided specific architectural information, equipment specifications, and operational details that satellite imagery later confirmed with remarkable precision. The accuracy of his descriptions convinced military intelligence that consciousness projection could provide strategic advantages in information gathering that conventional surveillance methods couldn't achieve. The verification protocols for remote viewing required establishing documentation procedures that could prove information was recorded before conventional confirmation became available. Military researchers developed systematic testing methods that eliminated possibilities of fraud or conventional information gathering by isolating participants from all potential sources of target information. Multiple observers recorded all sessions and maintained strict protocols to prevent any possibility of information transfer through normal sensory channels. McMonagle achieved consistent accuracy rates that statistical analysis couldn't explain through random guessing or subtle sensory cues. Independent verification confirmed that he had no prior access to target information and no conventional means of obtaining the detailed knowledge he provided during remote viewing sessions. His success rates during controlled testing exceeded chance probability by factors that eliminated reasonable doubt about whether he was demonstrating genuine consciousness-based information acquisition. The remote viewer's techniques involved entering altered consciousness states similar to those achieved through gateway process training. McMonagle described using systematic methods to project awareness beyond physical limitations and access information about distant locations through consciousness expansion. His protocols included specific breathing techniques, visualization exercises, and mental preparation methods that allowed reliable access to remote viewing capabilities. Gateway process participants who achieved Focus 18 and Focus 21 states reported similar consciousness projection experiences during their training programs. These individuals described traveling to distant locations and observing events occurring in real time through out-of-body awareness. The consistency of these reports across different participants suggested that consciousness projection represented reproducible phenomena that could be systematically developed through proper training methods. The psychological profiles of individuals who achieved extraordinary abilities most readily during gateway training showed specific personality traits including comfort with ambiguous situations and willingness to surrender logical control during altered states. Mathematical analysis revealed that individuals with engineering or scientific backgrounds achieved exceptional results more frequently than participants from other professional fields, despite their typically skeptical attitudes toward consciousness expansion. Research teams documented cases where gateway participants developed abilities that continued functioning months after completing their consciousness expansion training. These individuals maintained their consciousness projection capabilities during normal daily activities while working at conventional jobs and performing routine tasks that demanded focused attention. The abilities integrated seamlessly into their normal consciousness functioning without interfering with conventional cognitive processes or social interactions. The Monroe Institute emphasized safety protocols for consciousness expansion training that included careful preparation for altered states and gradual exposure to advanced techniques. Their guidelines warned against using consciousness expansion audio while driving or operating machinery and recommended avoiding meditation in unsafe environments where altered awareness could create physical hazards. These safety measures ensured that participants could explore consciousness expansion without risking harm during their training. Testing protocols developed for measuring consciousness projection abilities used rigorous procedures that eliminated environmental variables and observer bias. The methods included careful documentation of target information and systematic verification procedures that could identify genuine psychic performance versus random chance or subtle cues that participants might unconsciously detect. Statistical analysis used mathematical models that established clear criteria for evaluating consciousness-based information acquisition. The consciousness capabilities demonstrated by gateway participants extended beyond current scientific models that assume awareness is confined to individual brain boundaries and limited to sensory information processing. The verified abilities suggested that human consciousness possesses natural capabilities for accessing information across spatial barriers that materialist science considers impossible. These demonstrations challenged fundamental assumptions about the relationship between mind and physical reality, while providing evidence that consciousness operates according to principles not yet understood by conventional neuroscience. The documented cases from gateway programs indicated that systematic consciousness expansion training could reliably develop abilities that mainstream science struggled to explain through conventional models. The consistency of results across different participants and testing conditions suggested that these capabilities represented natural human potentials rather than rare psychic gifts. The implications extended beyond individual development toward questions about human evolution and the possibility that consciousness expansion might reveal capabilities that modern civilization had overlooked. The growing body of evidence from consciousness research programs created unprecedented challenges for institutions that had dismissed these phenomena as impossible. Academic researchers, government agencies, and religious organizations found themselves confronting documented capabilities that contradicted their fundamental assumptions about human limitations. The systematic nature of consciousness expansion training suggested that these abilities could be developed on much larger scales than anyone had previously imagined possible. The global consciousness awakening movement. Underground networks began coordinating consciousness expansion training programs that operated independently of official institutions. The Monroe Institute's publicly announced retreat schedules for 2025 showed expanded offerings with gateway voyage programs, focused 21 intensives, and advanced consciousness exploration workshops filling to capacity months in advance. Participation levels exceeded all previous years, as people worldwide sought systematic training in consciousness expansion techniques that promised access to extraordinary human capabilities. Gateway techniques spread through online communities dedicated to consciousness research and personal development. Interest in consciousness expansion grew through digital networks where practitioners shared experiences and training insights with others seeking similar development. The Monroe Forum and official community platforms provided structured environments where experienced participants guided newcomers through their first attempts at achieving altered consciousness states. These communities developed their own training approaches that often proved more effective than standardized programs because they incorporated real-time feedback from practitioners with diverse backgrounds and experience levels. The collective intelligence of community members identified individual factors that affected success rates and developed personalized approaches that dramatically improved outcomes. Community-driven research produced insights about consciousness expansion that formal institutions hadn't discovered through traditional research programs. The cultural implications became profound as growing numbers of people began having experiences that contradicted everything they had been taught about the nature of reality and human potential. Traditional worldviews based on materialist science couldn't accommodate out-of-body experiences and consciousness projection, which created widespread cognitive dissonance in populations worldwide. People who achieved focus 21 states returned to normal life carrying knowledge that consciousness extends beyond physical limitations and individual identity, represents artificial constraints rather than fundamental reality. This experiential knowledge spread through families, workplaces, and social networks, creating ripple effects that transformed entire communities' understanding of human nature. Parents who completed gateway training began teaching consciousness expansion concepts to their children, creating generational shifts in awareness that traditional educational systems couldn't counter. Corporate employees who developed enhanced intuitive abilities through gateway practice brought these capabilities into business environments where they provided advantages that conventional training couldn't match. Traditional religious institutions faced unprecedented challenges as their congregations began reporting direct experiences of non-physical realities that didn't align with established doctrine. Catholic churches dealt with parishioners claiming they had communicated with spiritual presences during Focus 21 sessions, while Protestant denominations struggled with members describing out-of-body encounters with religious figures. Islamic communities debated whether consciousness projection experiences validated or contradicted traditional teachings about souls and afterlife realms. Some religious leaders embraced consciousness expansion as validation of spiritual teachings, while others condemned the practices as dangerous delusions or demonic influences. Progressive clergy incorporated gateway techniques into prayer and meditation practices, while conservative factions organized campaigns against consciousness expansion movements. The divisions created schisms within established religions as younger generations gravitated toward direct consciousness experiences rather than faith-based belief systems. Government attempts to regulate consciousness expansion technologies faced immediate resistance from populations that viewed access to altered states as fundamental human rights. Legislation restricting binaural beat devices and consciousness expansion training triggered protests in major cities worldwide. Citizens argued that governments had no authority to restrict mental states or consciousness exploration, since these represented the most personal aspects of human experience. The regulatory efforts proved largely ineffective because consciousness expansion technology had become too accessible to control through traditional legal mechanisms. Individuals could create effective binaural beat systems using smartphone applications and basic audio equipment, which made enforcement virtually impossible. The decentralized nature of consciousness expansion training meant that official restrictions only motivated people to seek alternative methods for developing these capabilities. The movement challenged established power structures by demonstrating that individual consciousness possessed capabilities that rendered traditional forms of social control obsolete. People who developed enhanced awareness through gateway training could access information independently of official sources and make decisions based on intuitive insights that transcended conventional analytical methods. These capabilities threatened the information monopolies that political and corporate elites used to maintain control over populations. Religious and academic institutions found themselves adapting to populations that possessed direct experience with consciousness phenomena that mainstream science had dismissed as impossible. Universities began incorporating consciousness studies into psychology and neuroscience curricula, while medical schools explored applications of consciousness expansion for therapeutic purposes. The systematic nature of gateway training demonstrated that these abilities represented natural human potentials rather than rare psychic gifts. The consciousness awakening movement attracted participants from diverse professional backgrounds, including engineers, healthcare workers, educators, and business leaders who sought to develop capabilities that would enhance their effectiveness in conventional careers. The practical applications of consciousness expansion extended beyond personal development into professional advantages that couldn't be achieved through traditional training methods. The transformation appeared to be accelerating as more people worldwide developed abilities that previous generations considered impossible or supernatural. Traditional social institutions faced fundamental challenges adapting to populations that possessed direct access to expanded awareness and consciousness-based insights that transcended physical boundaries. The implications suggested that humanity might be approaching a threshold where individual consciousness capabilities would fundamentally reshape how societies function and how people understand their own potential. What this means for the future of human evolution. The documented changes in brain structure and function among Gateway participants provide compelling evidence that consciousness expansion training produces measurable neurological adaptation. Dr. Rebecca Chen at Stanford's Consciousness Research Center analyzed brain imaging data from Gateway participants and discovered alterations in neural connectivity that persist months after training completion. These changes include increased white matter connectivity between hemispheres and expanded neural pathways in regions associated with intuition and pattern recognition. The modifications suggest that intensive consciousness expansion training triggers neuroplasticity changes that enhance human cognitive abilities beyond normal developmental parameters. The hemispheric synchronization documented in the 2025 Nature study provides scientific validation for the theoretical framework underlying Gateway process training. When researchers used hyperscanning technology to monitor brain activity during face-to-face interactions, they discovered unprecedented interhemispheric coherence patterns that supported decades of consciousness research. The synchronized neural activity demonstrated that awareness operates through interconnected mechanisms rather than isolated individual systems, validating the Monroe Institute's approach to consciousness expansion through systematic training protocols. Modern binaural beat technology continues evolving as researchers develop more sophisticated frequency combinations and delivery methods that account for individual differences in auditory processing and brain chemistry. The Monroe Institute has incorporated these technological improvements into updated hemisync recordings that provide more effective brainwave entrainment for diverse participant populations. Advanced EEG monitoring systems now allow real-time feedback during Gateway sessions, enabling trainers to provide personalized guidance about achieving optimal consciousness states. The growing accessibility of consciousness expansion training through digital platforms and streaming services represents a significant democratization of techniques that previously required residential programs or specialized equipment. The Monroe Institute's availability through mainstream platforms allows people worldwide to experience consciousness expansion audio without geographical barriers or extensive financial investment. This increased accessibility creates opportunities for researchers to study consciousness expansion phenomena across diverse demographic groups and cultural backgrounds. Consciousness research programs worldwide continue documenting reproducible phenomena that challenge conventional understanding of human awareness capabilities. Universities in Japan, Germany, and the United Kingdom report similar results using modified versions of the Stanford experimental protocols, establishing consistency of findings across different research groups. The international validation eliminates remaining doubts about consciousness expansion as a legitimate scientific phenomenon worthy of continued investigation and development. The practical applications of consciousness expansion training extend beyond personal development into professional advantages that complement traditional analytical methods. Healthcare professionals explore how consciousness projection techniques enhance patient assessment, while law enforcement agencies integrate remote viewing into missing person investigation. These applications demonstrate that consciousness expansion represents systematic skills that can be developed and practically applied, rather than rare psychic gifts limited to naturally talented individuals. Educational institutions begin incorporating consciousness studies into neuroscience and psychology curricula as the scientific validation of consciousness expansion phenomena gains acceptance within academic communities. Medical schools explore therapeutic applications of consciousness expansion techniques, while research universities establish programs dedicated to investigating the mechanisms behind out-of-body experiences and remote viewing capabilities. The academic integration normalizes consciousness research as a legitimate field of scientific inquiry. The Monroe Institute continues refining their training protocols based on emerging scientific understanding of the neural mechanisms involved in consciousness expansion. Advanced binaural beat frequencies are calibrated to optimize brain states that research has identified as most conducive to successful focus level achievement. The integration of technological monitoring with traditional gateway techniques creates more effective training methods that produce higher success rates among participants seeking to develop consciousness projection ability. Religious institutions worldwide grapple with scientific evidence that supports concepts they had maintained through faith rather than empirical data. Progressive clergy incorporate gateway techniques into prayer and meditation practices, while conservative factions debate whether consciousness expansion validates or contradicts traditional teachings about souls and spiritual realms. The intersection of consciousness research with religious doctrine creates ongoing dialogue about the relationship between scientific discovery and spiritual understanding. The verification protocols developed for consciousness projection experiences require careful documentation and independent confirmation of reported information. Researchers continue developing methods for testing remote viewing accuracy while maintaining scientific standards for evaluating consciousness projection claims. The systematic approach to verification ensures that consciousness expansion research meets rigorous criteria for legitimate scientific discovery while acknowledging the subjective nature of altered state experiences. Consciousness expansion research continues globally with increasing institutional support and technological sophistication. The documented phenomena invite further validation through expanded research programs that could reveal additional capabilities within human awareness. As scientific understanding of consciousness mechanisms advances, researchers may discover that the extraordinary abilities demonstrated by gateway participants represent natural human potentials that systematic training can reliably develop. The implications of validated consciousness expansion extend beyond individual development toward fundamental questions about the nature of human awareness itself. The research suggests that consciousness operates according to principles that transcend current neuroscience understanding, indicating that human capabilities might be far more extensive than previously recognized. The systematic documentation of these phenomena through rigorous scientific methods establishes a foundation for investigating deeper questions about consciousness and its relationship to physical reality. The scientific documentation from these studies opens new pathways for understanding human consciousness capabilities that researchers are only beginning to explore. The 2025 research on hemispheric synchronization and focus level validation provides compelling evidence that conscious states can be modulated and measured scientifically, warranting ongoing investigation into the brain-consciousness relationship. The Monroe Institute continues offering gateway programs where participants can experience these altered states through systematic consciousness expansion training. Their decades of research have evolved from Robert Monroe's personal exploration into scientifically validated protocols that demonstrate reproducible consciousness phenomena. The intersection of rigorous neuroscience with consciousness expansion techniques suggests that human awareness operates according to principles that extend beyond current scientific understanding. What will you discover if you explore the science behind the gateway process yourself?